little bit about the kind of features and improvements you guys are working on for next version of Sangrelia?
So who had
that was my talk.
Who had that talk?
If there's a talk, then it's fine.
There was. You have missed.
So next version, do you mean 6.2 or beyond 6.2? 6.2 coming out in August.
Going forward.
Yeah, so I guess the two big headliners were scalability up to 90K cores, and what was the other one?
Multi-cluster.
Vista, exactly. Vista support for execution nodes. Those are the two big ones that everybody cared, well, that a lot of people care about, that we know we're going to be doing. But beyond that, it's a bunch of little things. You know, you look at pre-submission job wrappers and individual job environments, slot-wise queue subordination, and lots of little interesting things, but nothing on a macro scale. Right, so we don't have a theme yet, if you will.
Is there any micro scheme thing that you would be looking for?
No, I was looking more from like availability point of view, integrating with some cluster.
That's already
it's already
part
there.
of the product.
So just wanted to know from that point whether we should be on the lookout for something in particular or not. Not really.
Not that I would be aware. So one of the reasons why that's actually a relatively open in the next release is simply for, let's say, 80 or 90% of the use cases, Query Engine is reasonably good. There are lots of areas where we know improvement is required in terms of, let's say, if we want to go farther in scalability, if we want to improve certain quality criteria and so on. But that's more, internal stuff. That's nothing. That's something that you will notice, but it's nothing big to advertise. And then we have a whole list actually of like 40, we call it voice of customer list, 40 enhancements. We carry that 40 enhancements with us since quite a while. And we basically are ticking off a couple of them with each release. And the question of which one wins the race this time is really also dependent upon what type of feedback we are getting from customers if we get a push regarding some of them. So one example is, for instance, the graphical user interface or improvements around the accounting and reporting console. Those are two things which we know customers are interested in. Question is, how many of those customers are really dependent on those functionalities? What does it drive for us? What does it drive for those customers? The more understanding we get about that, the better our decision is going to be.
I'll ask something. I was at Dan's talk about what's in the future. I don't remember anything about enhancements to advanced reservation. And then I saw the talk about advanced reservation. It does seem to be missing a lot of stuff that I think would be key. It's like, change a reservation rather than delete it when it's all jobs that have been moved into it. And, is that on the board to be done, or is that kind of like, maybe later?
The original spec actually included the ability to modify the advanced reservations, and it just fell out for lack of time and priority. So it should be in that list. And something else that I also didn't have in my presentation was ARCO. There's a lot of interesting things going on around ARCO, but I just ran out of time on having a slide on that. But so yeah, being able to, one of the things that we hear a lot, and I think actually would not be a huge amount of effort to do, and heck, maybe someone out there in the community, wink wink nudge nudge, would want to contribute this, is putting together an advanced query that could go through and do capacity planning from the ARCO database. Because theoretically, right, looking at the ARCO database, what jobs were submitted, what resources they were requesting, which ones were left pending. From that, you can get some idea of what resources are missing for you to have 100% of your jobs running at any given time. So you could do some kind of capacity planning based on that. And it's just a SQL statement. That's all we need for that. Is just a SQL. It's like a 4-page SQL statement, but it's just a SQL statement. And Yana doesn't want to write it.
Do you need
So-
this? Anybody needs this capacity planning in the room? Or you can live without it? No answer.
Yeah, so anybody here use ARCO? That's a good question. So, all right, so let me rephrase that. Of the 3 people in the room who don't work for Sun, do you use ARCO?
I installed it, found it to be more complicated to use than me writing my own thing from scratch.
That's kind of the same thing here.
Yeah, so more complicated to use than writing your own thing that uses the ARCO database or that reads the accounting file? The accounting file, okay.
I think the last time I played with it, it was actually hard to get my hands on the Java WebStart application server that ARCO required. So I had ARCO sitting around on my system, and I couldn't find, for the life of me, find where I could download the appropriate app server to contain it. And I think that's changed recently, or at least it's much more straightforward on what you download.
Yeah, so there was at some point kind of the chair was moved away under the distribution because the app server component had resided somewhere else which we were linked to, and then it was moved away, and we didn't notice until somebody reported that.
And now it's also included in Solaris.
Yeah.
So it's already installed there, the Sun Java Web Console. So if you have Solaris, you don't need to install it anymore.
But, so yeah, that's an interesting story.
A large ETA ISV recently published that code.
Yeah. Yes, I heard about that.
So maybe we should port it to a normal web application file, which can be deployed in any application server.
Yeah, so what's the feeling on this web console thing? Does anybody have a feeling about web console, and if so, what is it? Sun Web Console, the framework that we use that ARCO runs on. The ARCO UI, I should say, runs on.
No, that's not the ARCO UI, this is just the server.
Well, the UI is built to use the thing that hosts the UI is Sun Web Console. So Sun Web Console. So I've heard that
just
it's
deploys in the Sun Web Console.
yeah, I've heard complaints that it's annoying, that it bugs people, that it's terrible and horrible, but is that substantiated? I mean, have you guys who've played with ARCO looked at Sun Web Console and run away screaming? And was that the thing that drove you crazy?
It could be less complicated. I mean, for me, a Perl script and a PHP page is enough. I don't know that
Okay, that's one side of the equation. So what I'm wondering is, I mean, the ARCO database, so the stuff that we're basically exporting into a vanilla database, that has a whole lot of more information than the accounting file.
I don't understand how the database has more information in the accounting file. I guess my interpretation's always been I can do whatever I want in the accounting file.
Let me rephrase that. That's certainly correct. But so let's say the way how it is structured in principle, the way how you can access it is just normally. I mean, it should be easier. It should make it easier for you to more or less generate the types of reports that you want to create. And also, I mean, the parsing the accounting file normally is. I mean, I would want to do it if I were you, but you seem to be fine with it. So that's why I'm wondering.
I guess alternatively too, I often in real time and piping out QStat or QHost information straight into a SQL database of my own that has the information I want and access it that way, because I guess some information's not available once the job's finished, and so I think I capture information in multiple ways. And obviously, if you're trying to do a solution for all of us, it obviously has to be a lot more complicated, whereas mine can do exactly what I feel like I.
So, and by the way, the database does arguably contain information not in the accounting file because of the derived values that the DB writer can calculate. So technically, the derived values are extrapolations of data that's in the accounting file, but it is new data that doesn't actually exist in the accounting file.
Is there also scaling information and stuff from a scalar file exported?
I'm not aware of. I'm pretty sure all that goes into the accounting.
So one piece of feedback we had was that they would like to see a CPU history usage. So like every minute, how the job uses the CPU. So they want to find out, is the job using 80% of the CPU in the last 10 minutes of the execution, and things like this are not available right now. So it's not that they are stored somewhere and are not, you can't obtain it, they just are generated. So that's something they would like to look at the history of a job and see, okay, how did this job use the resources over time. So,
Okay.
and in terms of the UI, they want something that you don't need to be an SQL expert to basically access the database. Something very simple, an interface with drop-down menus and buttons and things like that.
I thought that's what Arco
Calendars.
was.
Yeah.
But I think we as engineering cannot realize such a tool because there are a lot of vendors outside which provides business intelligence tools which invests hundreds of man years into these tools. I think our group will not be able to provide such a sophisticated tool. And
so maybe another question to that effect. How? I mean, you said you do with your parsing and so on exactly what you want. How specific to your site is that? What you're doing? In other words, if we were having a wide enough set of queries and reports that would actually reflect what you want close enough so you could use it right away, then I guess you wouldn't want to maintain your own stuff.
Nice to not have to maintain your own stuff, for sure.
But the question is, I mean, if it's really something where you pull together lots of data from other resources and combine it with the stuff that is in either the database or the accounting file, then it's something that we arguably cannot do. And then basically, Richard's statement is, so then basically one of those business intelligence management tools would be the right answer for you.
Well, part of it, I would say, the lowest level, I think something like Chris wrote, the XML QStat. I think that kind of interface is probably useful at a generic level, that most people can use some kind of tool like that to monitor the overall health of their queues. But I think that in general, Grid Engine is so flexible in terms of how you manage complexes. So I have memory complexes. Each of my systems have different amounts of memory, and I have them bucketed together to where I want to manage my 32 gig systems, my 120 gig systems separately, and that's not something that everybody needs to do. And so I think to some degree, yeah, my needs are different than the next person's, and the next person's in terms of the granularity.
The great groundswell that I've been waiting for is the community to just start churning out spuriously tons and tons of Arco pre-canned queries and dumping them on gridengine.info.
Right. But now they can dump it on wikis.sun.com, which I think might be a kickstart, which would be kind of cool. That may be a location where some of those queries can go. And related to that, do you guys remember when Charu was showing, he opened up a Star Office document and there was an embedded SQL query, and he was generating grid engine graphs within a spreadsheet, which I thought was a really cool, nifty, clever use of the Arco database backend. Maybe some how-tos or examples on doing something nifty with the Arco data. That's I don't know. I just like the idea of being able to query that stuff from any application that can speak SQL to a server. I thought that was a pretty neat trick, but I didn't really see it go anywhere after Charu left.
It was 3 years ago, right?
That was a long time ago, but I was blown away. He opened up Star Office and there was all kinds of graphs that just popped up, and it was talking directly to Arco in the back end.
Haven't chewed enough on Oracle. Anything else?
So, Roland, you want to talk any more about the advanced reservation and the stuff that, the shortcomings that we're going to address, where you see that going? What's the next step for advanced reservation?
depends on the management.
So the question is, what would you fix in advanced reservation if you had 6 months to go fix stuff?
At first, the modification, of course.
So you said a modification, the ability to modify reservation, but what else?
I don't know. I had to go over the list of the issue list and fix them.
Not bug fixes.
No. There are a lot of RFEs already, and yeah, they have a priority, and I would go from top to down of the priority of the RFE list and fix this.
a very accurate and precise answer.
Yeah.
So, what is the feeling on the fact that an advanced reservation terminates your jobs when the advanced reservation itself ends. If there are jobs running in an advanced reservation at the time that the reservation ends, those jobs are terminated. Period. No questions asked. Done. Gone. Goodbye.
There was a feeling expressed about this, you should give the administrator the option to choose.
Yeah, I know that particular, yeah. But does anybody else have that opinion? Does anybody feel like this should be something that should be relaxed?
I think that should be an option.
Yeah.
You know, hard kill, not hard kill. Rather than just no option, it's always kill.
And is that simply because it seems like it's more reasonable, or is that something that you actually look at and go, gee, I could really use that?
I think it just seems more reasonable. I think probably most people aren't always sure how long their jobs are going to end. I think they're used to having some sort of a hard kill, but there are times, especially when it's an important, I'm reserving this because I have this, it has to be done at this time. I think if it runs a half an hour long and it kills it, you're gonna have some fallout for that, in my opinion.
The nature of advanced reservation makes it complicated to use anyway. I mean, the fact that you're having to deal with time buckets anyway is a commitment. I could, my environment would be hard to get the engineers to buy into that, but I could see how that would be neat. But I don't know that that particular hard deadline is any different than the other hard deadlines that get kind of put in place when you're going to actually implement that.
But this is partly why it took us also relatively long to even implement advanced reservation, because actually the use cases, the cases where customers would be really wanting and relying on advanced reservation are not that widespread. And specifically in, let's say, commercial accounts, you hardly find anybody even considering advanced reservation. It's really more for research environments with shared funding, where it's just a funding requirement to have secured, resources at a certain point in time, where you hit that requirement.
Visualization users need advanced reservations so that the machine resources and the human resources are available simultaneously.
Which is why you wrote your own. You're right. That is actually a good point insofar as if we were driving other specific equipment.
Yeah, anybody dependent on an interactive service needs equipment and people in the same place at the same time.
So one of the interesting potential uses of advanced reservation I've seen lately is as a job container, so that I know I've got say an array task or an array job, and it's got 1 billion tasks in it, but I don't ever want to run more than 100 at a time. I could use an advanced reservation as a job container to block off that 100 and just submit to my reservation, and that way I don't ever have more than 100 running. I guess that's also a workaround to not being able to set up your own resource quota sets. If I could set my own resource quota set, I could say, don't ever let me run more than 100 jobs, and that would also solve it.
You brought up, or actually when you started to talk about advanced reservation, you actually said it misses so much or something to that effect. So maybe you could.
Well, it's just a whole modification thing. I mean, there's times where you have a window of time that you expect to have it, and say it shifts over, even like you have an hour reserve time that you want to do maintenance or you want to do whatever, and for whatever reason something's running late, you just can't stop it, and you want to delay it a half hour, you'd have to delete it and then recreate. In that case, it's no big deal. But if you have an advanced reservation with 1,000 different jobs, as it currently stands, you have to, even if you want to shift it within the time frame that it currently is, you have to create another reservation in the future, move all the jobs out of it into that new one, delete the old one, then create a new one in the time frame you really want it, then move all the jobs back in the other one. That's like a lot of headache for. It's like almost not worth even using.
Well, so the modification is clear here.
Yeah.
But any other bigger things?
Well, I mean, just reoccurring reservations. I mean, a lot of times you have scheduled things. So I mean, it's kind of like I'd like to think of it as like a cron sort of, where at certain days we have this blacked off for certain uses, and then, you know, with the high priority. I mean, we have it all jerry-rigged right now anyway with resources and all sorts of other ways to do it. It would just be nicer to not have to rely on other jobs and, you know, change, you know, and alter what we have, and just have it done for us with a simple, you know, reservation. So, I mean, it's like, I mean, I think everyone has 1,000 ways to skin a cat. There's ways we get around it, but, you know, it'd be nice to have a leeway.
It feels like advanced reservation naturally would lead to less efficient use of resources. Have you guys done any modeling to kind of see if that's how it naturally plays out? I mean, obviously it depends on how long jobs are, but I would assume that if you have a reservation, you're going to be erring on the long side, and so you finish up and your slot's still kind of there and your job's finished, I assume. I haven't looked at it details, but
it's clearly less efficient. There's no question about it. You don't even have to model it. I mean,
so that makes it less relevant for, you know, commercial industries as opposed to academic institutions as well.
No, it's simply, I mean, if you're in a commercial environment, then you either have, let's say, one type of workload that you just want to get through as quickly as possible, or if you have multiple competing workloads, then you usually have a sense of priority, you know, certain project or whatever. Either, let's say, a sense of priority or a sense of resource entitlement of those projects, and you want to manage that dynamically. But you never want to just block out resources and then eventually let them idle around if nobody just comes up and uses them.
But we all know our users are extremely conscientious, and as soon as their jobs are done running in the advanced reservation, they terminate the reservation. So there would never be any idle resources.
Our side, reservation, we don't let users make reservations because of it. So sysadmins make reservations so they can schedule for maintenance and in fact that, but no user reservations.
Okay, so the more features we add up, I've been with Grid Engine since even before we were part of Sun, you know, for many, many years. So we kept adding features and features, making the software better and better. Every time we add new things, we add to the complexity of it. So we had people, you know, that had a problem learning actually the core Sun Grid Engine. Now we came with Arco, so you have to learn Arco. And then we came with the Service Domain Manager, which is, I don't know if any of you have seen the presentation, there's something else that you have to learn about it. So we don't want to become to the point that we are unmanageable with so many features. So any suggestions from you? What do you find out? Is that manageable? I mean, you can use the software the way it is right now?
When it just works out of the box, I think that there's a lot of configuration options, but it works out of the box. I think it's clearly, it feels to me very clear that it comes from a commercial enterprise that knows how to deal with, you know, with industry. That if you compare it to something like Globus, which is impossible to run out of the, you know, the proverbial box kind of thing. I mean, it's clearly far superior in terms of how it's distributed. I can have someone on my team who's never played with Grid Engine before, who doesn't know a lot about clustering, and they can get a, you know, cluster up and running in under an hour. I mean, I think you guys have done a very good job in making it very usable, very accessible.
So did you try to change the parameter to fine-tune it for your environment, or you don't touch it?
Nearly as much from like the man pages or the actual PDF documentation. I think it's going rather than installing it, and then whenever I encounter a problem, go to the mailing list, search the archives, and find the solution there.
So will you, wait a second, let me pick up on one point there. So would you guys be willing, once you have discussed something on the mailing list, then now use the wiki that we have set up for the documentation in helping us improve that stuff? Because, I mean, weeding through email archives isn't exactly the best use of time either.
And occasionally, it's a deep dive, but yeah, I think the wiki will, I hope the wiki will be a good resource for that.
So one of the things that on that thought, one of the things that I've been somewhat surprised at is there has not been more of an uptake of dumping that kind of domain knowledge onto gridengine.info, because we've had that wiki for a long time now, and it has There's some stuff out there, but it's not like a culture has developed around taking discussions from the mailing list and moving them onto the wiki so that others can use them in the future. So I think that'll be a prototype for, or gridengine.info, what we've done there will be a prototype for what happens on wikis.sun.com. So why hasn't that culture emerged? Why don't we have tons of use cases? Why don't we have pages and pages and pages of best practices and use cases on gridengine.info? What's wrong with you people? No, but so what is it about it? So, why isn't that happening now, and how can we make that happen in the future, whether it's gridengine.info or wikis.sun.com?
I don't know exactly why, but I think the same thing's happening internally on my team. That my team is pretty good at doing documentation, but the few people who hold knowledge about Grid Engine, it's not a lot of it's documented in there. How do you actually get from this transient problem and actually turn that into what the solution is for that? How do you carry that forward? And I think a lot of problems that require deep knowledge to be able to diagnose before you actually know what to do are often difficult to document. So I don't know, when I search the mailing list, I'm searching for this error message that's popped up, and then there's a couple different problems, that I have to figure out which one it is before I can figure out which solution's there. And I don't know, I think I tend to have problems writing down problems that that are complex to understand. And yet the mailing list seems to be a viable way to get that done.
So is the answer we just need to get
the common stuff. Just putting out a wiki isn't going to mean people are actually going to do
Exactly.
it.
Exactly.
Related to that a little bit, the hosting platform on gridengine.sunsource.net, it's still a little bit hard to search the mailing list. It's still a little bit hard to kind of navigate around in there. I still end up going to Google and doing a couple of custom terms to kind of get back in and deep link into the mailing list, although I'm pretty good about navigating around the site now. But I think it's I think you had specifically mentioned about why people don't move knowledge off the mailing list into the wiki. Some of it is like that. When I do a Grid Engine blog post, a majority of the time is spent finding the appropriate link so that I can link to the email thread.
Right.
And even then it takes me a while to get to it.
Okay. So I guess the answer is Thomas Reuteman's just way too helpful. Reuty.
Nothing else, there's only four or five really strong contributors to the mailing list. Maybe it's them we should be focusing on. But I'm not one of them. I think Chris is, and I think a lot of developers are. That means the knowledge is already in the hands of developers, obviously.
Well, there's the two sides of it, right? There's the developers who understand the internals of it and that know the guts of it, but then there's the folks who have the actual problems, and you guys understand the solution space and you're the SME, right? We've got the technology, but you guys are the ones who are actually doing something with it. You guys are the ones who know what a solution is and smells like.
So the point is simply, reflecting, for instance, let's say, how to tune Grid Engine to perform better in a certain situation is something that we can do, but the way how we would describe that situation does not necessarily speak to the domain expert who wants to solve, let's say, a biotechnology problem. Right? So that's the link which is missing, where you basically, if you're a user, you run into a problem, you want to find your problem being reflected, and you want to actually be able to recognize that it's your problem they are talking about there. And that's what sometimes is missing. Besides that, there is far too little kind of how-tos and stuff like that in the existing documentation. It's much more a feature description than a really, let's say, online help of what you want to do.
I know my team internally, in terms of documentation for how to do things like install Grid Engine, it really works well in a wiki to be able to do things like that. But in terms of how to solve problems, I know that my team has internally struggled with that format. That historically we've used, different kinds of mechanisms to store problem-solving kinds of things, facts, things of that nature. There, you search for a certain problem, but I know we've internally had a lot of problems putting that kind of information into a wiki format. That it seems to lend itself more towards, tutorials, things of that nature, and less towards here's a problem, here's the solution. So I don't know that the wiki will be the solution to that.
Well, what I was going to say to your question, basically, the advantage of the wiki is, of course, you look into the documentation. you have it open basically, then you find, well, it doesn't really help me, or that doesn't seem to be correct. It's easier to just simply say, okay, let me change that, than if you have to switch websites and find the right spot where to put stuff and so on. It makes it a little bit easier. That's all it does.
So I think we're getting into something that I also find interesting as far as community. I get the feeling kind of, and particularly from the folks in the room, that this is less of a partnership. The feeling is not that you guys are in, you're using it and it works. The fix a bug kind of community. And this is ultimately where we want to go. Doing open source, the whole point of having a community. And I get kind of the feeling that maybe we've more of a client-server model.
I think in terms of, I have hundreds of thousands love to contribute to the community, but the lawyers won't allow me to. That it's nebulous. That my company used to be HP, and so we have a lot of DRMs from developers or my companies. And all the, our own internal implementation, Flex element integration, became quite what we were looking for. What you're now doing with a precedent three jobs. I would love to be able to contribute. I mean, I don't care about the code that we're not open source it, but that actually contributing that code to the community. I don't know, it's a tough hurdle, and it's tough. I could spend 5 years and get over.
Well,
I don't know quite how to do that.
Otherwise, you spend 5 years.
Just knowledge sharing and how to get around.
The thing is, I mean, that's a very mentioned by others too, that so in other words, we have companies who have certain regular limits, the champion.
So the Rising Sun picture, great job interdependencies, is a star of community contribution. From that, it's little things here, a lot of code there. But I mean, and that's, I mean, it's I'm not saying, but the question I was asking is, what can we feel more empowered and to want to go out to gridengine.info, write down every use or every in your head, and what can we do to facilitate the community?
Former technical writer who has also met pulling knowledge just an online format. It does find and the so maybe we could send technical writers out to talk information out of them. I don't know if we could find those people.
Would certainly be interesting. Yeah.
A tech writer and write it down as how to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Easy coming, for me, I know I have a lot of friends who are across So and they've, I hear project in HP is, is one project here, one project there. Was a massive undertaking for the corporation to allow that to be out. Stuff, and they don't plan on selling. It's just a matter of if there wasn't liability out the door, the same day, there's the inherent liability. And some of it's, I think, probably change laws to intend to do, but be positive was written, by the license and actually belonging to different. I think that's what prevents a lot of end up using to customize things.
About this, so I'll give you guys blogs from everyone in this room. That's a way to have knowledge share. I mean, it's a very, and it doesn't have to be related to your current company. You go get a bot blog, and that's an easy way to document something you just figured out. So that's I haven't baby, and I haven't blogged well my. But I haven't because of that. But when I was still oftentimes was, that blog, 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 blog. I had a eureka moment looking at it as well. So blog, that's your carry out.
But people seem to be pretty aggressive about, in the whole event. I mean, all these big from all kinds of sites, and they seem to be really big on that whole 2.0 Web 6.0. It remains to be seen how they've got at least a full-time person working on it now.
For a full-time person.
Yeah, talking. Yeah.
If you have blogs on Grid Engine or related technologies or anything, know where it is. We've got a couple of that I will get into. So in particular, the HPC.org. So what else? What else is interesting? What have you always wanted to ask but never had the opportunity? Do you? No? All right.
I guess I could do that.
So, when you hit one of those error messages and you have to go in God's name it's supposed to mean, go to, that's fine, go to gridengine.sunsource.net, click on Issues, File a Bug. This error message makes no sense.
All right.
Honestly.
No, seriously.
I do this all the time.
One thing that I end up noticing is that, so because I'm familiar with the tools and whatnot, I can infer from, a detailed queue stat of a job ID why a job is waiting in the queue as opposed to running, what hard resource request is not available. But that's often something I have to infer. I don't always directly see, in one location, what hard requests, what complexes are not available, what is run out. It might be nice if in somewhere it might already exist, but if somewhere I could, send a command to ask what requirements are not currently available, and just have that sent back to me in kind of a human readable form. That if I have a custom complex that's out, it tells me. If I have a requested an architecture that doesn't exist. It just says, yeah, I'm waiting for this to become available, and it's currently not available.
That would be nice. We would use that too, because we have a lot of situations where our users will call and say, my jobs aren't running, and it takes some research to figure out sometimes why something isn't running. And I do use QConf-TSM, but it doesn't always go through all the jobs. I just had that happen recently. It gives you a subset of jobs, but it doesn't go through every single job number that's queued if you have a certain number. So that would be really handy. I would like that.
You know, the last two comments that were just made were talking about the utility of scheduler messages and QStat output. Compare that to the talk over the mailing list the last couple of weeks, where A, that's going to be turned off by default in future versions of Grid Engine, and B, there's now recommendations from Grid Engine users that you disable that at the scheduler level for, I think it's memory, was it related to the memory link or something else, but so some of the feedback here you're getting from the community is that those scheduler messages are really important, and we need to be able to figure out, I mean, I understand maybe turn it off globally if there's a way to make a query of the queue master to get that information on a per job basis, but I guess the feedback you're hearing here is that some of these features, disabling by default and recommending people turn it off for memory reasons or performance reasons, that's actually going to hurt some of the users who rely on that information.
So one of the issues that we are having there is basically that Grid Engine is turning a little bit into, as we would say in German, the egg-laying wool milk pig, right?
Yep.
So you have it installed in TAC and you have it installed in 2 or 4 node clusters.
Yep.
And that's of course a completely different scenario.
QStat minus F at TAC must be
you just cannot afford to do something like that.
Yeah. You know, maybe just like there's a scheduler tuning profile, there's some other sort of profile that's sort of roughly analogous to the size of the cluster, or not even the size of the cluster, the size of the job throughput. You know, there are people with small clusters who do 10,000 jobs a day, and you know that type of sort of tuning might actually be interesting as well.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that there should be either a profile that you can pick, or something, or an installation, or whatever, something like that. So what would turn Grid Engine into the coolest thing that you can imagine for whatever you do? Is there anything?
Just curious, who thinks Grid Engine installation isn't easy? The installing a Grid Engine cluster is hard. Okay.
The Tucson guy.
Yeah.
Marketing and engineering too. Well, you know, in fairness, we may have done more installations than the average person in this room.
I think in general, we should have everything scripted up where, installed so many times, I think we've rewritten the installation mechanisms to a large degree to where
it's a number of fork points that you have to know a priori what you want to do and what you're trying to build. And if you're just trying to set up a very simple job execution environment, you can't do that without knowing everything there is to know about how to deploy Grid in the first place. So, I can do it, but it definitely is more complex, I think, than it needs to be. And that's just an artifact of having added feature after feature after feature without really rethinking the original premises of the whole install environment. I mean, this is kind of a side point, but I still get a giggle when I install Grid and see it come up, and I see that motif style window that takes me back to 1994 or so. It could use some makeovers, just not from a cosmetic point, but also from a functional point.
We giggle too. No, but actually, I'm just telling you, in the workshop in Regensburg, where we had, fortunately, about 10 times as many people here, we did a hands up on, okay, do you use graphical user interface in your daily work? Almost nobody raised their hands. If we had a cool web whatever, or would you use it? So that's the reason why it's not there, quite frankly.
Yeah, but you're asking the wrong people. That's true. You're asking a very select bunch of people that already know really how to use it, and it's not the people that we're trying to attract in this massive commercial space that are used to these sorts of automated tools. And Microsoft is working day and night to make that easier for those people that we're not talking to.
my company does grid engine support, so I'm often the guy answering the help desk from the people who are trying to install it for the first time. And really, the single, going through our own help desk system, 90% of the installation errors are coming from people who don't get the dependencies right, and it's always things like forward and reverse DNS. There's little things that Grid Engine is unusually sensitive to that if you are new to Grid Engine, you don't realize that. So I think at least in my experience, my customers generally don't have a problem installing Grid Engine, but in many cases, the first time around it fails because of something silly. For instance, CentOS Linux puts the host name in etc host at the 127 node.0 loopback address. Grid Engine bombs out when it sees the host name associated with the loopback address. So it's more things like dependencies and networking and forward and reverse DNS. But what typically happens is they try, they fail, they open a help desk ticket, we send them the answer. Second time around, it goes perfectly smooth. So it's things outside of Grid Engine that are getting them.
So has anybody used the easyinstall.conf file? Just curious. Anybody even know of the easyinstall.conf file?
It's buried down in the util bin.
It's not even included. It's buried on blogs.sun.com under my blog. But it's so Grid Engine has the auto install feature, right? So I put together a script based on information from Jeff Beatles, actually, that it's an intelligent auto config script that probes your system and figures out what you've got. And so you just say inst sg-m-x-auto easyinstall.conf, and you get a one node Grid Engine grid, no questions asked. Is that useful? Is that something that we should have included in Grid Engine? Or is a instant one node grid a useless thing to start with?
No, I don't think it's useless in the least. Certainly for people that want to play with it on a laptop or on a home system, it's valuable.
I've never heard of that before, so yeah, maybe you need to blog it more.
Well, so this came from stuff that Jeff has pioneered a bunch of really cool stuff, and the idea of a self-probing autoconf script came from him. So I based on his work.
Yeah. Going back to the magic bullet, I use Torque. I'm looking at going to some grids, novice. But if there was one feature that could make a huge difference for me, and it's a bigger picture, but that would be checkpointing. And I know that's in things and with the kernel of software or so, but that would, I can see a lot of uses for that, and that would propel, because you can then have, if you're able to checkpoint jobs and you're able to migrate, then that would be a significant improvement, because you can then get into the function of being able to move jobs around and utilize a cluster at its fullest.
So what does Torque provide you for checkpointing?
None.
Okay.
I'm saying, going back to wish list.
Right, gotcha. I thought you were saying you saw it in Torque. Right?
No.
So Grid Engine, we will merrily take advantage of a checkpointing environment if you have one, but we don't give you one like Condor does. But part of the problem with that is there's so much specifics to checkpointing, and right, if we gave you a checkpointing library, you'd have to recompile all of your stuff to use our.
That's why I say wish list. There was one.
Well, what's the right answer there? When you say give us checkpointing, what does that mean? What exactly does that mean?
Being able to take a job that is running, literally save the state, and be able to resume it.
Right, but so it's a give and take, right? For us to be able to do that, you've got to either compile against a checkpointing library or always run in a virtual machine so that we can freeze the machine and run somewhere. So what is it? What would the give on your side be for that? What would be ideal?
Ideal would be at the kernel, where the user doesn't have to literally compile against any libraries, and where it's just done at that level.
Well,
that's
switch to IREX.
That's the only Unix operating system or workstation that actually has kernel level checkpointing. Otherwise, you run to Cray Unicode or Mac SuperUX or something like that.
Yeah, we had an SPP 2000, and that's great. And I understand the complexity of it. I'm just saying that from there we can work down and say, maybe make it as easy as possible with libraries or so, and wherever, if you're using MPage or so, here's the things you can do, and we have it.
my advice in general would be, because actually nobody probably sits here who was with me at that time, but in about '94 we actually shipped even the predecessor of Grid Engine with a checkpointing library. We developed our own, which was a nightmare to support, so at some point we dropped it again. But my advice basically would be, well, get a checkpointing facility. There are, like on checkpointing.org and so on, there is a whole list of stuff. Not everything is in useful quality, but some of it probably is. I haven't really checked for quite some time. And just try it out with your applications, the ones you really care about, and check whether that gives you what you want. I mean, just manually. And if it really does, then you're actually done, because you can integrate it into the engine. And it will work. And if it doesn't, then file a bug, because it should work. Unless really trying that stuff, because you may actually find that the checkpointing libraries, the approaches which are out there, just don't work with your applications. And then we just, if we include it into Grid Engine, we're kind of setting an expectation which is completely outside of our control to fulfill. Which is not an excuse, I'm just saying.
Yes, no, I appreciate the complexity. I just think, I wish.
Sure. Yeah, magic checkpointing would be really nice.
Yes.
Well, I mean, virtual machines may take us there eventually. But so my favorite little trick that I've been using a lot lately, it's come up as a useful thing, is what I call a null checkpointing environment. Right, Grid Engine has checkpointing built in. So, or not built in, it has the ability to use checkpointing if it's there. So it understands checkpointing. If you have a job that's checkpointable, Grid Engine can migrate that job instead of suspending it. Well, if you've got jobs that you just really don't care if they get stopped and restarted somewhere, you can set up a checkpointing environment that doesn't do any checkpointing. Right? And then you flag your jobs as null checkpointable, and when Grid Engine would suspend them, instead it will migrate them, but because your checkpointing environment doesn't do anything, the migration is stop and restart. I find that to be kind of a thing that has come up on multiple times lately as a useful trick.
I have a problem that I looked at solutions, and there are ways around it, but so on my cluster I have a complex set on everything called memory that is set essentially to how many gigs of memory the servers have. And I have a gradient of servers ranging from, I think, 4 gigs up to 128 gigs. All on a common queue, an open queue that everyone can access. And so naturally, when my cluster gets busier, things have a tendency to where smaller jobs end up overflowing into larger servers than I would otherwise prefer. You end up having a job that requested memory equals, say, 4, it might land on a 64 gig server. And since I only have 2 job slots, if 2 of those jobs end up there, that's not how I want to utilize that server. I'd rather have it only picking up larger jobs. I guess I would, conceptually, I mean, there's a couple of servers that will, for at a certain point. I've told users to basically give me a server with 4 gigs, but that has I would like for 2. But go ahead and if this server certain number available. I'm looking for a suggestion that I might not know about, or
I can think of that you could machine still runs those little jobs. 2 spots left for big jobs, but it won't solve your problem
sequence numbers?
Yeah. Still, the smallest servers first. Solution, the situation right now is I have, as long as the cluster's not, if someone submits, if I have 302 job slots, if someone submits, jobs very quickly, all the big stuff up. I mean, there are administrative tricks at this. I have user lists right now that expensive iron, but it would say, allow if 5 different grades of servers, 4, 8, 2, 64, something along those lines. The class above you, the class that's required, if you're the smallest server possible first, classes, but not all the way. 2 gig job running on a 120 gig server, but I don't want a 1 gig job. I want some kind of control over a ceiling. And MemTotal can offer that, but to enforce it on the administrative side, allow users to decide if they want to use it or not. I'd like to say, requested for, complex, then don't go up to a server beyond total of 60 assigned to it.
Okay.
It's something that I think put someone on, for but I'd rather run something off the shelf.
Flags, right? If the user says one or true, and then 4 flag to only small and medium servers.
I can envision that.
Train your users,
Yeah.
Well, that's a good, reasonable suggestion to try. But in general.sunsource.net, click on Issues file. The more you tell us, the more we can do.
I guess the one thing I think about that solution is some of the flexibilities with multiple job slots. You want to, issue I have. All
Any other comments or questions?
Okay, I'll add one more. This isn't an issue I'm working with. I don't know if it's still in play, but always had to be a manager. You couldn't turn that off. Accurate? Or whatever the right terminology is, I think it's manager. Remove root as a manager of my cluster.
I believe by definition root is. Can you?
I think you could edit for the next restart.
Historically, also did not obey the rules that administrative hosts can essentially. And so because root was always a manager and any system that had access to my cluster, that ultimately means that any user has physical access to a box who they want. In my environment, users have root anyway. There's nothing I can do to on physical access to my network from basically getting root on their box and QMI command wipe out all my access, which I always
I think the principle only don't need to be on root.
About it, but as far as the requests that are associated with, even though they come from QMon, say, hey, am I coming from an admin host? Then function.
No, you can QDEL from anywhere.
historically, like now, historically, QMod did not administrative host rules that QComp does. That separation. Why doesn't QMod?
That statement is true, and if it is true, that's what I would say.
6 update 8, so
daemon does nothing else than GET request, which the client commands do. Checking, I don't see why it should.
Open it.
Yeah,
But MOD, not QMOD. Oh. Basically, I can go onto a host that's not that as administrative host. As long as I'm a man.
Because you're not actually.
And so used to kill jobs in my cluster.
Yeah.
The signals have been configured, but because we ultimately do kill jobs. Presumably everyone, or at least sig terms or sig.
So I would say that the thing about root always being a for 6 figures, you can get an unlimited license, which lets you have as many nodes as you want. Right?
And for me, it's a matter, right? It's a matter of I want to, I want to be able to support financially the decision to have the products that I like out there, so that they keep being developed and whatnot. But at the same time, I don't know.
Let me ask you a question. Is the fact whether Grid Engine is operational or not critical for your business? What
DRM
happens,
is critical.
What happens if Grid Engine doesn't run for a whole weekend, let's say, or overnight? Does that cost you money?
Yes. I mean, fundamentally, I need some DRM in place that if Grid Engine somehow, if the bits were off my server, somehow erasing my servers and I couldn't re-download them somewhere, I would have to get some solution in place. Part of the issue is that, I have internal people who know Grid Engine well enough to where, so far, I can't imagine any problem that couldn't be solved, worst case, by going back and reinstalling from scratch, which still only takes, half hour.
A support contract is a insurance policy. It's nothing else.
Right.
And I can assure you, Grid Engine can stop working. It has happened before. There have been cases where we have even trouble to get it going again. And if you, let's say, on a Friday night, specifically Friday night here in the US, when all of the engineers in Europe, for instance, are long asleep or partying or whatever, if you discover a problem and you write it to the mailing list, at least the engineers are not going to answer. So you have to be very lucky then to, or basically do self-support to get that done.
I guess I would.
Whereas in the supported case, you have 24/7 support.
I guess from a.
And there are people there which are not engineers, but which do code fixes, which can supply you with a P-patch. So that's the insurance policy that you find.
My point of view on the topic would be probably that, I guess, I feel comfortable that there's no existing problem that I couldn't that I couldn't work through. If the bit stopped working somehow, I feel like I could personally walk through making it work like it did 5 minutes ago, kind of thing. That I think I would be more compelled to purchase support if it was, say, giving me some different priority over a new feature I want to have installed, or a bug that this is a bug that I want to have fixed. That it impacts me. It's not got me offline, but this is a bug that I would be better off without. That if I was in fact getting not so much front-line support, but in fact funding deep support, I think that would be an easier sell for me. Whereas frontline is kind of like I feel I have enough expertise on my team internally that I don't feel the need for that, I guess.
That is one of the other things that you actually get.
That is totally what you get, because we've used that quite a bit. We've never had a call for, oh dear God, everything went wrong, but like AIX, we had a hard time trying to get AIX to function properly, and then I don't know how many relief binaries we were sent, and eventually got it working and everything. We had a problem with the QMaster. It was like a weird bug, but we got it fixed before it got released out a couple of iterations later to the general pop. I don't know. I would thank God we had a contract.
Also, the whole, you experienced the whole Windows port. We went through whatever it took in order to get that working. It was certainly a frustrating process because it was a learning process for all of us, but we would never have done that for somebody on the open source list to complain that whatever we have put out there is not working, not to that level.
So, and when you're dealing with support, I mean, yes, we have a support organization, we have multi-tiers of support, but ultimately, if it all does hit the fan, you may end up back with the engineers at any rate, but as a supported customer who can say, I want you to fix this now. Yeah. Roland?
Running out of steam. We're running out of time also. So we don't want to keep you from your whatever evening entertainment. So thanks for the feedback. It was a great discussion.
And definitely consider trying this again next year. I know there's maybe some disappointment of the attendance, but on the face-to-face, the high bandwidth talks, being able to see for real the people that you know over email is valuable. I mean, Germany was great. If we could get more people out to a US-based event too, that'd be fantastic as well.
Even not what they're saying, just on Facebook.
Yeah, it's there are people that
So much hate.
There's people I've conversed with over email for years that I never met for the first time until I went to Regensburg. And so that's very sort of valuable stuff. And also, these sorts of gatherings tend to self-select, and hopefully, as it gets bigger and more popular, we'll have a more general crowd of users, and be able to solicit some more feedback, from the casual